FinTech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in FinTech executive search. Welcome to FinTech Chatter, the show where FinTech leaders join me for a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today's guest is Andrew Black from ConnectID. Andrew leads ConnectID, which aims to become Australia's first and leading reusable digital identity exchange. It allows citizens to take more control over their identity and data, and enables organisations to unlock value and reduce security risks. Part of Australian Payments Plus, which also includes EFTPOS, BPay, Beam, and the new payments platform, ConnectID provides businesses access to trusted and reliable identity data, and is partnering with Big Four banks to launch this digital identity ecosystem for Australians. Andrew is an established leader in the digital identity industry, working with state and federal government here in Oz, along with international bodies to help shape future technology and policy to help protect citizen data and rights. Over the past decade, he's led digital ventures on data and cybersecurity in two major UK banks, and has most recently led open banking and digital identity. Before we chat to Andrew, make sure to give us a follow and a subscribe if you're new to the show, and if you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to catching up, Dexter.
Mate, well, very nice to meet you. We've never met before, so usually when I have somebody on the show, I've met them. We've had a bit of banter, so this is going to be a bit of a unique experience for me. But you're only up the road from me as a Scotsman, and they say that Geordies are just Scotsmen with their brains kicked in. So I'm sure we'll have a good chat.
I can't promise banter, but we'll have a go. Certainly, I spent a wee bit of time in Newcastle in my younger years as I dipped my toe across the English border. But yeah, I think very good people.
Mate,
would very happily.
I won't ask what you. I won't ask what you were doing there. Cool. Now, before I get you into trouble, you best tell me a little bit about ConnectID. But can you share us a little bit more about what the business does?
Yeah, for sure. So ConnectID is a digital identity exchange. So we're effectively kind of a RegTech platform. And what we do is we allow people to prove they are who they are, or sort of key facts about themselves in a simple, secure way, reduces the amount of data they have to share. It's fundamentally trying to solve a problem that's kind of emerged over the last couple of years of increasing, I guess, risk that you're constantly being asked online to prove who you are, upload documents, share loads of information. And actually that's sort of starting to spiral a little bit. So what ConnectID will do is allow you to take somewhere you've already proven you're Andrew Black with and reuse that in a sort of reusable, safe and secure way. We, as you mentioned in the intro, we're part of Australian Payments Plus, which is a newly formed group which has brands like PayID, Pay2, EFTPOS. So it provides that sort of critical national payment infrastructure for Australia. And for ConnectID, our role is to sort of grow out a business that provides that national infrastructure, but in identity instead of payments.
Well, and so who typically would be your clients and customers?
Yeah, so we've got sort of three-sided marketplace, really. We've got what we call reliant parties, which is effectively businesses or any organization really that needs to verify something about you. So that could be a merchant, could be banks, could be, Airbnb. So when you're looking to log on and set up a new account, and effectively need to prove you are who you are or verify some attributes or facts. We've then got as well on the other side of that marketplace what we call identity providers. So those who've already, again, established something about you or know something about you. So that could be your kind of core identity that I am Andrew and I'm over 18, for example, or even my university, right? So did Andrew actually go to the University of Glasgow? So the types of kind of credentials or facts about that. And then the end user. So sort of individual identity owner who is the one that's sort of using the platform, is the one that's signing up to Airbnb, for example, and wants to be able to verify that they are Andrew, but without having to share their driving license, right, or their passport, or sharing kind of heaps of information.
So we've had kind of verification and kind of credit assessment companies around for quite some time. What is it that they're unable to do that has created this opportunity or helped you spot a gap for Connect ID?
Yeah, it's really that kind of reusability part, right? The kind of customer friction of having to do the same thing in multiple places, right? Whether you're all those kind of key life moments that you think about as a customer, you're trying to rent a car, during your holiday, you're trying to go through the airport, verify who you are, you're buying the flights, you're renting a car, you're checking into a hotel. Now, for those individual businesses, that's just one interaction. But for a customer, you're doing it, 5 times during that entire trip.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the gap and that sort of friction that we sort of spotted and we've been working on over the last couple of years to take, well, I've already proven it with, say, a bank or a state government or another kind of trusted provider. I'll just reuse that and reshare that. So that's kind of the core friction change point, moving us away from, one-off point in time verifications to me having a trusted identity set up with somebody that I trust to look after, kind of important stuff about me and be able to just reuse that.
So I'm going to be really selfish here because I was a victim of the Medibank data breach. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions around this problem. But I guess that one of the questions that I've got is that why is it that organizations need to store that data about an individual? You mentioned there, could in the space of 2 hours have to go through that process 5 different times, and that means 5 separate companies now have really sensitive information about me now on their database that's at risk of cyber attack. Why is that the case?
Well, look, firstly, you're preaching to the converted. As a Medibank and Optus customer, I got the double whammy last year, so
right.
They obviously knew who to target.
Mate, if I tell you what, right, if our phones go off, I bet you it's a scam, right? I'm getting like 10 a day now since this Medibank breach.
It's wild. But the question and the way you phrase it is really important, right? Do they need to? So there's 2 elements. So some industries there's a regulatory need to, prove that I'm Andrew up to a certain point. And some it's just sort of entrenched behavior, right? And it's sort of the behavior of over the last, I guess, decade or so, the default has been, well, let's gather more data about customers. Let's gather more information just in case, right? Actually, well, maybe we'll store it just in case. And that's just actually a lot of the time not required. It's just a bad compliance habit and behavior. And the other part for those who are regulated to actually capture it is what do they need to capture? So what we're trying to transform and what Connect ID will do, right? But is allow you to share with, say, Medibank that I am Andrew. There's been a driving license check that proves I definitely am. But you don't actually need the driving license. And you certainly don't need the license number or the fact that, can I drive a motorbike or a lorry, or to what level of class is on the license? All that kind of extra data that businesses don't need. And actually now we've seen that kind of real shift over the last 12 months of actually perhaps them realizing, well, maybe we don't want to store this and moving to a sort of data minimization, model.
Yeah. It's interesting you say it because I remember like about 10 years back, we had the whole big data is oil kind of phenomenon, right? And, it was like, and I think what's kind of transpired is that actually data is kind of useless without context. And we got so much of it now that I really don't see a great deal actually being done with this data that's being stored that's helping me as a customer. What have you kind of seen, Andrew, in terms of the response that you've had when you've gone out and you've started to speak with businesses about this problem and this solution?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, right? And seeing that sort of shift, and you can see it in those organizations of seeing, where's the value for them? Is it in having data that might not be hugely beneficial, or is it having a really kind of tough and tight kind of compliance and risk profile and lowering their risk profile. So what we've actually seen is really interesting. We see kind of customers actually coming to us and asking now for, all right, how do I just assert information rather than have it? So great example being, if it's an e-commerce journey and you need to know I'm 18 to, say, buy alcohol online, some of our customers we're working with actually don't even want the date of birth. They just want to say, is it Andrew? And is he over 18? Now, previously that would be, we need the date of birth to store that, verify it, and actually maybe send them birthday offers, marketing offers or loyalty offers. And you can still do that. You can still send me it on my birthday, but you don't need to know the year, which then means as a risk profile, if that information is ever leaked or hacked, it's far less valuable for any sort of attacker to be able to use, or scammer to be able to use. So there's been a real shift, which is encouraging. There's certainly still more work to do, but more of the concept of actually it's my data as a customer. This touched a little bit on open banking, but it's my data. So I should be in control of where it's shared, how much, and how much do you actually need as well.
And have you been able to assess kind of the size of this opportunity here in Australia?
Yeah, and we have, and even kind of globally, right? It's a huge opportunity. So just a couple of kind of benchmarking stats, it's well over a billion transactions a year that have some form of identity, verified in them from differing levels of, again, just proving I'm over 18 to actually taking out a mortgage, right? And that sort of sliding scale of levels of friction and assurance. But alongside that, there's actually, sort of estimated by fairly strong sources here that there's about 3 billion a year in Aussie dollars of fraud related to identity.
Wow.
So the kind of opportunity on both sides to make things far easier, far more frictionless for customers, but actually take out heaps of risk and fraud as associated to this, and the downward impact. Now, breaches are going to happen. That's just going to be one of the natures of doing business. They'll become less and less, but it's how do you lessen the impact of it as well, so that the next time my details get out, they don't have a driving license associated to it, or my date of birth, or a password and things as well. So the fraud element's a massive opportunity to reduce the impact of it.
Yeah. And given, I guess, the kind of the ownership structure where you've got the big four banks as kind of part of the Australian Payments Plus kind of ownership, how receptive have you seen the big four banks to kind of getting involved and taking on this kind of solution?
They've been amazing, to be honest. And that's me coming from a different jurisdiction where we've been trying to do similar as well. But I think everyone understands that to do this, you need collaboration, right? Not competition.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to bring this for good. We have other shareholders as well that are, for example, Coles and Woolworths, some huge trusted kind of retail brands, as well as payment providers and other banks, not just big four. But that kind of notion of building an ecosystem and building a kind of strong, trusted marketplace, and doing it together is kind of what's been the foundation of the business we've been building, really. So it's been amazing to work with them.
Yeah, we had Paul Weingarth. He's been on the show a couple of times actually from Slip, and I think that was kind of the key challenge for them, was to make sure that they had the big four banks all unified, because you couldn't make the solution just for one of the banks. It had to be all, everybody really had to be playing game. How have you found actually kind of bringing everybody together and getting consensus? Because I would imagine, just working with people who, come from innovation labs or, those areas of banks, it's really difficult to get consensus just with one kind of group of stakeholders, never mind from all of these different businesses. How have you found that part of the job?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's actually not as hard as maybe envisaged. To be honest, I think I always started from the why, not like the what should we build. So when you kind of look at the actually why, the benefit for the country, the benefit for citizens, you sort of park the technology conversations, or you park the sort of scheme rules conversations and the governance conversations to start with. That's just concentrating the why. Pretty quickly, you get kind of people around the table and really engage in kind of co-creating and building. And then
I would imagine there's fairly strong buy-in from the chief execs as well, who the last thing that they want is to go through when chief exec of Optus or Medibank are going through right now.
Yeah, exactly, right. And one of the big things we hear actually is that, customers kind of expect their banks and others to be doing this already, in terms of we trust them to look after money, we trust them to provide that sort of safety deposit box. So actually I trust them with my data or my identity and that kind of brand. So, them adding this as features to kind of unlock value, and not just banks again, but state governments who work pretty closely as well. It's sort of there's a little bit of social or societal pressure on them to do this because customers are looking to them, businesses are looking to them. So there's a real drive. But again, we've had really good kind of strong senior leadership and engagement from the execs across the board. Actually, this is just the right thing to do.
It's really interesting you say that because when I have talked about and had conversations with people about the future of banks and the threats, and embedded finance and banking as a service and all these other kind of forces that seem to be conspiring against them. I've gone back to whenever there's a challenge in my business, I always just go back to origins, right? And how did the business start fundamentally? What is the problem there that you had to solve? And that's the same with banks, right? It's it was keeping my money secure. Now is it keeping my data secure? My digital assets secure, all of that side. And so, the kind of vault now is a digital vault versus a physical vault per se.
100%, right? And that's the same across the board that, as sort of those digital experiences and embedded finance, kind of proliferate, you still need those kind of core tenets of identity, storing things, looking after things. They don't go away. The experiences might look a little bit different, but it's how do we kind of change and take away from, in identity in particular, the default has been, let's digitize an analog process. So, you turn up, normally you used to turn up 20 years ago, you'd take a piece of paper along and that would prove you are who you are. And then what we did was we slapped a camera on top of that and went, that sounds good enough. We'll just take a photograph of that document. And this is sort of that next evolution. So it's
but the next evolution was PDFs, wasn't
it? I'd say just email it to me now. That's the
just take a photograph of it and email it to you. Yeah. Mate, that's a really nice little kind of lead into what I wanted to ask you next, which was, how does it actually work?
Good question. So we provide effectively a distributed peer-to-peer platform. So what we do is we bring on board to Connect ID all of those reliant parties, so the people that need to know something about you, as well as all the sources of identity and trust. And we sort of provide the rails underneath that and the connection point. So using kind of a high-grade security profiles and standards allow that direct encrypted transfer of data, but only with customer consent as well. So Connect ID itself doesn't see any data. We don't store any data. We don't know any PII about you. We just provide the sort of the ecosystem and the rails and the framework to do that. Yeah. And from a customer, what that sort of looks like is if you go into, let's stick with Airbnb, for example, today you would see the process where you have to verify your identity to set up an account. That looks like a big long manual form. So you fill out a bunch of information, you attach a PDF or you attach a photograph of a driving license or some sort of document, document verification. And then it goes off and is processed in the ether and somebody in the background has checked it. Going forward for Connect ID, what that means is on that page where you're setting up the account, you'll see a Verify with Connect ID button. Once you click on that, you'll then see a list of all of those trusted providers. So that will be banks, that will be, again, state governments, so the likes of Service New South Wales in the future as well. It could be telcos going forward as well, and other private trusted organizations. And as a customer, you then choose, right? So who do I want to share my identity information from? Yeah. In this case, say, insert a name of bank. And then you're directed to the banking app. So again, one of the kind of core journey sort of points and the value proposition pieces we think is really strong is that there's no new setup. You don't have to set up an identity. You don't have to create an account. You just log into your bank in the same way you normally would today, right? Whether that's a PIN password or facial biometric check or fingerprint recognition, you log in the same way. You'll be displayed then with the information that Airbnb is asking for. So if it's my name, it's my address, if it's my date of birth or contact information, and then you'll be able to consent to that. So importantly, that consent is always captured. The individual is always in control of sharing or not sharing that information. And then it's passed back to Airbnb and you're taken back to that experience. So the customer then has a history of what was shared and when. Airbnb gets a really strong set of high quality data without having to have the underlying documentation as to how they got to it. And that sense of trust as to what level it's been checked and verified to. So providing that kind of seamless journey, but with Connect ID sort of providing the marketplace and the platform rather than actually seeing anything, storing anything, or having to sign up for anything.
What are some of the cool things that you're working on right now? Are you able to share?
Yeah, so we've been in sort of semi-stealth mode, I guess, for the last couple of years, which is sort of emerged last year, announcing those sort of partnerships. So we've built out our sort of production stack and platform and basically onboarding partners at the minute, which is super exciting. So we'll be onboarding more and more partners and customers, moving towards sort of a launch in the middle of the year. So that's kind of
awesome.
Priority 1, 2, and 3 is kind of launch in the middle of the year, which is awesome.
And have you kind of had any feedback from actual consumer side as to their thoughts on it? Because one of the things that's always struck me here in Australia, we've and having been kind of early days in the discussions around CDR, still to this point, I don't think there's been any consumers kind of consulted on it. And you ask the man in the street what it is, they wouldn't, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. What kind of kind of insights have you had so far from consumers as to this type of solution and how they see it as being relevant to them?
Yeah, what we tried to do, which I think makes it a bit more powerful, is apart from what we might be doing today, but we don't talk about it as identity verification or digital identity, right? For a consumer, the friction point is proving something about yourselves to buy something or set up a platform. And more in particular last year, given the sort of the breaches, doing that in a way of I just don't want to share that much information.
Look, I did that this morning. Actually, I was kind of doing something online. It was like share your driver's license number. 1, I didn't have it with me, and then 2, I was like, do I really want to be giving that information out? Online right after Medibank.
Yeah, and then the other thing that we got, which is has been a really good bit of feedback actually that we sort of didn't really expect as to be as important to people, but having a sort of consent history of what did I share and when, so that when something like that happens, you're like, God, did I have an account with Medibank? Was I a previous customer? Or just having that sort of dashboard of saying, okay, this is what I shared. It came from here when I did consent to it being given. So having that sort of end-to-end like confidence of, okay, I am still in control of that. I did share it. It's sort of
so would this be then something similar to say what I've got with a credit bureau, where I can go in and sign up and I can see my credit score and I can see where I've applied for credit and credit history and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a little bit, except you won't have to sign up for anything. You'll get it immediately if you're using any of those providers. So if you're major banked or actually some of the fintechs as well that we're sort of talking to bring on board, or kind of governments, you'll just get that as a service. There's nothing new to sign up for. But it gives you that level of confidence, which was actually really encouraging to hear, because I didn't think it would be as important to people, and it really kind of came out.
As I mentioned in the intro, you've spent a fair bit of time in the UK on their open banking program. Clearly, kind of there's some similarities to some differences. Given the position that you're in, I mean, it seems kind of like you're ideally poised to have a view of CDR in its entirety versus just the banking component. What do you see as the kind of key differences or distinctions between what's been happening in the UK and what's happening here in Oz? And what's your general kind of consensus as to, how advanced we are and what needs to be done next to kind of push it on?
Yeah, it's been really interesting actually looking at the two, and also taking a sort of step back from the CDR open banking world and seeing it. I think probably a couple of observations. One is sort of the core difference being that here we seem to have gone for a thin level of attributes, use cases, but broader segments. So thinking energy and telco, and moving beyond there, which feels a little bit like we're sort of scratching the surface. Whereas the UK seems to have focused more, or has focused more on sort of a deep dive into open finance as a sort of sector, and then obviously payments and things kind of off the back of that, and a different payment, landscape here. So there is no kind of pay ID, pay to equivalent in the UK. So it's sort of slightly meeting different needs, but the needs part is probably the bit that I guess I'm really kind of keen to see how it develops. That kind of consumer need of just sharing information is useful, but it hasn't really kind of seen the mass take up that sort of expected. And it sometimes feels like, a solution looking for a problem, right? I think. Yeah.
I mean, I've got to be honest, right? Like what you shared with me today seems to be a far stronger use case for kind of the technology and what we're talking about than, and I've always been skeptical of it, which is, you're going to use my data to give me better products when, you've been trying for how many odd years and I still get the same mortgage, still get the same insurance policy. Like, there's not really a great deal you can do with it other than change the price, right? Like,
well, this is it, right? And I think that what will be interesting to see, and I think where there is some value to be had, is how do you add that to other journeys, right? How do you add it as well? So again, thinking about identity of, I'm going to have to verify I am who I am to take out a credit card or a loan or any form of kind of lending product. Does any of that affordability insight, give me anything better on top of that? On its own, I don't know how valuable that is. It gives, there's not the same kind of competitor as maybe a separate observation, but the kind of neobank startup kind of challenger bank UK scene is far stronger. So that kind of gives them more of a leg up in terms of competing. It's maybe not as strong here. So we're sort of starting from a lower base of how do you give fintechs more to compete and kind of disrupt? And I don't know if open banking's the only answer to that.
Yeah. I guess look, one of the kind of key things as well is consumer fintech here is really difficult because of the size of the market, right? And the fact that the big four banks are so competitive. Plus, when you add onto that an additional layer of some of the most profitable banks in the world, particularly kind of post GFC, they've done an incredible job and invested a lot of money in digital, which I don't think necessarily was the case in the UK.
Lucas, somebody with a background in Royal Bank of Scotland, which didn't do particularly well out of the GFC. It's evident to see, right? But it's not just the UK market's a bit bigger, but just geographically, you've got the whole European market to sort of play with as well. So you see challenges from, N26 from Germany and others that, did great strides and moving into that. Revolut's sort of real driver in the early days was actually young people traveling and European travels and, going from London overseas to Paris for the weekend and sort of transaction interchange feeless spending. So that's maybe just different demographic and how they went to capture customers. And then they've established themselves with heaps of awesome products after that. But the ability to grab that foothold in the market is just a different nature.
Yeah. And what kind of prompted you to come out to Australia?
Oh, I got a very straightforward sales pitch from my wife, who's from Manly, who's from Sydney. So
right, yeah, mate. I used to live in Manly. It's it's kind of it's hard to think of a better place to live other than where I live now. But look, it's just beautiful, right?
Oh man, it's not a tough sell. Like it's obviously from Scotland originally, but we spent sort of 6-7 years in London after a brief stint in Newcastle in between the two, and yeah, we're kind of ready for that as a lifestyle. I've always been keen to move out here. I don't highly recommend doing it during COVID. It was a fun challenge of lockdowns and quarantines and hotels. So if you want to test your relationship on, you do 2 weeks in a hotel locked together, it's a good laugh, but we're still married and still together. That's fun.
There you go. There you go.
Lifestyle really, right? And then that kind of led into employment after that. But just love the lifestyle living here.
And I guess from a kind of leadership perspective, what have been some of the challenges that you've noticed that maybe you kind of weren't quite expecting, putting COVID to one side, coming into a leadership role here in Oz? We hear a lot about a talent shortage. I think there's kind of, to an extent, I agree, but I also think there's my experience of Australia, having been here for nearly 20 years. I'm still always struck by how the hiring seems to be very much around ticking boxes versus thinking outside of the box. Even in fintech and where we're meant to be innovative, it still seems to be very much around kind of, have you got somebody with 5 years experience doing the thing that I need to do? And it's like, no, nobody's done it before. You guys are pioneers, but you're looking for somebody who's done it before.
It's funny, right? Because I've not come across a shortage of talent. I think there's a shortage, in the way of trying to attract talent. Right? So I think, as you said, it's been interesting moving from a large bank to what is now a 30-person business, right? So we're building a business with only kind of 30 people, even within a larger group, but moving unbelievably fast. And I think to do that and do that well, it's about the vision, right? It's about what you're trying to build.
Yeah.
I think if you have a strong vision and a clear sense of where you're going, people want to build cool stuff, right? And want to be part of big, important things. I think what's more important that sometimes I see people miss, and I don't always get right myself, but is, what do you need for the business? That's not a tick box and experience or qualifications, but what do you need, right? And I've got a fairly strong background in sports. I tend to use the sporting analogies, but knowing that, as a defender, I play a role in a team, and actually I don't need a defender, I need a striker. And as long as you kind of, as a leader, I think, are clear on why, and the high quality vision and drive, and also what do you need from people. A team of 10 strikers does nothing for you, right? You kind of completely miss the point. Everything else I'd say that's coachable, right? Or teachable, in my opinion. That if there's skills that haven't been learned, or you got 4 years experience instead of 7, who cares? You want good quality people who are bought into what you're doing, who know what they're there to do, and also empowered to be able to do that. I don't know how much more complex it needs to be than that, to be honest.
So it's interesting you say that, because even at a senior level, right, exec level, in close to 50% of the inquiries that we get, right, so companies approach us and say, hey, we're looking to hire X. When I have the initial briefing with them, in almost 50% of cases, having gone through that process, they then recognize that actually what we thought we needed isn't what we need, and we need to go away and rethink this. And all I do is just apply principles that they're doing day in, day out with product, which is, first principles thinking, right, around what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? How does hiring this person solve that business problem? Oh, great. So now it's solved 3 months in. What happens to that person? Oh, never thought about that, right? Right? Or who internally, if it's 3 months, who internally can you give an opportunity to step up and see them? And I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so skeptical about talent shortage is that half the time businesses are hiring when they don't even need to hire.
100%, and that's where better than I do, right? But that's also how you retain talent. Otherwise it's not just attracting; it's in a market, we're in a really amazing situation where we've got the opportunity to kind of lead and do something hugely disruptive. But you don't just attract new people; you want to retain top talent and give them that opportunity to do so. And that for me comes a little bit as well to. It's been interesting seeing the kind of evolution of hiring and mass scaling up to now the last kind of couple of months of what metrics actually measure success, because hiring doesn't mean success. Like, that's growth is measured in a couple of different ways, but maybe it's my frugal Scottish nature. But like, doing things lean and being effective and being efficient with what you've got is that's kind of 101. But it's been funny.
One of the interesting things that I've found in my career in recruitment, which is close to 25 years now, having recruited through now 3 kind of economic downturns, and this one's been the weirdest because we had a mini downturn in 2020 and then it went crazy, and now it's almost like this, death by 1,000 cuts. It's really slow, kind of laborious, kind of just the thumb screws are getting tightened on everyone. But what's interesting every time I've seen a downturn has been this shift or migration of talent, where they go from the kind of high risk, sexy stuff. In 2008, everybody wanted to work for investment banks. And 2 of the 3 clients that I had at the time, 3 biggest clients, 2 of them went out of business, right, in the GFC because they were so highly leveraged. But what's interesting is every one of those periods, we've seen people kind of migrate from the high risk, kind of, very attractive, to then go to something that's not as high risk, safe. I wouldn't call it boring, but we've seen 2009 talent that who wouldn't have even gone for an interview at Commonwealth Bank or Westpac. All of a sudden, were asking me to get them an interview at Commonwealth Bank or Westpac. And we kind of often see that migration in these periods. And I wondered if you've kind of seen, whether the access to talent has become easier over the course of the last 6 to 12 months as the market has kind of contracted a bit, or whether it's still kind of really tough out there.
Honest answer, not sure. We've seen probably bits of both, where we've been able to attract awesome talent and people away from big organizations to come and work in a small business and building this because of the vision.
Do you think because of the backing that you've got, and who's involved, that it kind of almost is like the best of both worlds? You still have the kind of startup, kind of, you get your arms around it, you can make an impact, but you got the security of, hey, we've got some fairly substantial backers here.
I think it helps for sure, right? You kind of get that ability to move fast and break some things, not all things, but move fast to kind of build a new and emerging market, but with the support of some of the biggest names in the country, retailers and financial services. But which is awesome under Australian Payments Plus. But I think going back to, are you solving a core need? And if you're a core need, it doesn't really matter on the size of the organization, right? If you're providing that, use the word at the start, but kind of infrastructure, and whether that's banking or whether it's identity or whether it's real estate or whatever, the sort of infrastructure that sits around that, I think there's a tendency, as you say, to go for the, I don't know, I'd like to class as shiny and sexy, but sometimes, go for the other shiny and other sexy stuff. But it's understanding from people who then perhaps left that sector or, perhaps kind of made redundant of why. What was the core driver to join there? Was it shiny, flashy things, or was there a mission you believed in? And I think if there's a mission that you kind of fully buy into, and that's where, again, I think we're fortunate. I hope it's sort of fairly deliberate in how I've kind of tried to set the business up, that you've got the mission that's important, the kind of criticality of why it's important, and then the platform to do it. So I don't know, I think we've been fortunate in that we've still attracted awesome talent, but at the same time, I think when there's a need, I think you're always kind of important and sort of people want to join. Yeah.
It's about the mission, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. You touched on this earlier about fintechs here in Oz. What's been your, I guess, kind of impression in the time that you've been here? And what's got you excited about the Australian fintech industry?
I think it's awesome. Like, I think I've been really impressed by the innovation and the volume of awesome new ideas that kind of come out. We're really lucky at AP Plus to work with a kind of incubator and a few awesome fintechs that we kind of support, and seeing, and not just fintechs, tech startups as a whole, and seeing the kind of amazing stuff that's coming out is is unreal, especially for, they're playing about the size of what the market is versus others. I actually think it punches way beyond its weight, way beyond its weight. So it's been interesting to see. I think I'm really excited to see what happens in embedded finance and I guess what we're calling in the future sort of open payments, open commerce. And I think things like buy now, pay later had a role in sort of changing the experience, whether that will as an actual lending function will last, but changing the experience and it being more geared around open experiences for customers, right? So not having to go out and take out a product to then go and do something else. Just doing it in one flow and one experience where you identify, you have a wallet where you set things up and you've got everything kind of stored. You're able to access goods and services in one experience. So that's I'm really excited to see that, and I actually think that's where there's potentially a role for open banking and open data to play in the future, right? As part of the experiential layer, rather than just in the sharing kind of direct kind of peer-to-peer layer.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some really interesting stuff. And whilst I've been, maybe a little bit, I wouldn't say negative, but just watching with caution about embedded finance, because I always want to temper the hype with the kind of the practical kind of implementation of it. I think it is perhaps the time now, certainly from a technology perspective, where this becomes a lot more feasible than it was in, say, even 5 years back. And the appetite is there from businesses now in this period where they're looking for additional revenue streams, and it's a lot easier and a lot more cost effective, and there's fewer upfront costs to actually make that happen now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that battle for the customer now becomes in the experience layer. And now, how do you make that better than providing just the kind of core underlying tech stack, but also kind of a really important battleground, right? Going forward is, does that experience become open? So can customers choose from marketplaces of many in embedded finance, or is that journey owned by an Apple or a Google, right? So,
yeah.
And I'm a hypocrite, right? As I sit here in my MacBook with my AirPods and my fully Apple fanboy, but the ability to let small tech players or startups play in a kind of open experiences ecosystem is vital, right, for competition and getting the best out of each other, right, rather than relying on an OEM.
Well, we're coming to a wrap up, Andrew, but before we do, one of the things that's really always just puts a smile on my face is when somebody shares feedback about the podcast and how they listen to an episode and give them insights or inspiration, whatever. And for me, it's what it's all about. And so the question I've got for every guest that's coming on the show this year is, hey, what are the podcasts that kind of you listen to when you're looking for info on fintech or digital ID, specifically in your space, and the ones that kind of got you kind of interested in the first place?
Well, I guess saying yours is, if people have already come here, then hopefully they're already on the bandwagon. But especially for me coming here only a couple of years ago, to understand the state of the fintech market here and the players, I've genuinely enjoyed kind of fintech chatter and all the work here. So that's been awesome. On identity, there's an awesome one from the States called The State of Identity, which looks at kind of quite a few different areas around tech, but also global trends, regulation, all the different moving spheres, which is one I highly recommend. I've also had a friend actually recently turned me on to, it's not identity or fintech, but an economics podcast called the David McWilliams podcast, who's an Irish economist who does an awesome job at just giving a really good kind of macro lens on huge trends and huge trends that are sort of human driven, right? So how do you separate the changing of inflation rate, type mechanism from actually the human trends that drive that underneath?
So the kind of behavioral economics side of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Man,
that sounds great. I'll actually have a listen to that one because I'm fascinated by that stuff as well.
And then at the minute, all things Scottish rugby is very good. So anything with rugby, and 2 from 2 in the Six Nations, you can't get enough of it. But I'm sure after a trip to Paris, we'll stop listening.
Well, and look, before we do wrap up, kind of anything exciting, any exciting news that you've got to share?
Look, the main thing I sort of touched on earlier, we'll be bringing this thing to life this year. So it's a wildly exciting kind of 6 months for Connect ID. All our participants will be launching kind of middle of the year and then rolling out with a heap of new partners and into different sort of segments and sectors. So watch this space. It's going to be an awesome 2023.
Awesome. So any founders out there or kind of, business execs that potentially want to partner with you on Connect ID, where do they go to find out about it?
Yeah, so you go to connectid.com.au, or you can track me down on LinkedIn, I'm sure fairly easily, and reach out. We'd love to work with people.
Cool. And as you admitted to just a few moments ago, we have some awesome talent listening to this show as well, right? If there's anybody listening who thinks that this is a mission they'd love to be involved in, what's the best way for them to find out about careers and reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, ping me on LinkedIn. Always keen to hear from people who are passionate about working in this space and passionate about building big important things. Reach out, or again, you can kind of Google Australian Payments Plus kind of career site and see what's up there.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, it's been great to chat with you, and look, thanks for all the work that you're doing. I think it's a super important part of fintech that we don't kind of discuss enough, and it's something that I think really does. It's for me, it's instrumental in CDR being as effective as it possibly can be.
No, I agree. No, thanks, Dexter. Great to chat.
And you can connect with me, folks, on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks for listening. If you're new to the show, make sure to give us a follow. And if you're watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. Until the next episode, stay safe.